Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Disclaimer. The information shared on this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered as professional advice or a substitute for seeking professional advice. We had all met physically for the first and only time, technically, at CrimeCon 2022. Fun, festive, a lot of drama behind the scenes. However, I had laryngitis, so I basically had almost no speaking skills.
The only time Jake has ever been silent.
We had so many conversations about doing podcasts about ghosts and cocaine bear.
What's up on a haunting?
I still want to do ghosts. I still want to do a ghost story.
We do. Yeah. That would be fun.
Anybody who's willing to take the bait, me and Jake are willing to interview anyone that has a ghost story. If you've been haunted, please reach out. bigmadtruecrime@gmail.com. Okay, bye. It's constantly on women to walk away from everything they've earned, everything they've built, everything that's a part of their story, to start at zero. And these men don't have to.
Domestic violence has no equation that you can plug these things into and see what's going to happen unless strangulation is involved. And then it's like a roadmap to what's coming. I mean, just really, like Heather said, play that back. Your chances of homicide increase 750% for people who have been previously strangled compared to victims who have never been strangled.
I was raised by a homicide detective, and so my dad would just tell me about his calls for the day, and that was my bedtime story. And like, nobody just was like, hey, pass the salt. It was like, oh my gosh, my partner fell into the river today, or like my arms went numb because I got cocaine spilled on them. So like, very normal stuff.
I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Michele Locke.
And this is Lovelus Fridays. Here we delve deeper into the topics, themes, and stories featured on Loveless Fear. Today, Michele and I are excited to welcome two very special guests, Heather Ashley and Kyle Ashley.
Heather is a violent crime intelligence and reduction specialist, as well as the host, researcher, and writer of Big Mad True Crime.
Kyle is in the Navy Reserves, former law enforcement officer, editor and producer for Big Mad True Crime, and host of the Critical Incidents podcast, where he features unfiltered conversations about pivotal, heart-stopping moments in people's lives.
Heather and Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today. Both of you bring so much experience and insight to the table for a variety of reasons. We'll go with each of you first. Can you tell us a little about your careers outside of podcasting? Let's start with ladies first. Heather.
Yay. Because who runs the world?
That's exactly. We do.
I know.
No argument.
Smart men.
I think everybody knows me from podcasting, but besides podcasting, I do criminal intelligence, specifically for violent crime. And I do have to be a little bit kind of wishy-washy with how I describe it, because it does have a lot of sensitive and case-specific information. But I do my best to try and prevent crime from happening in our area, along with the help of some pretty incredible people. And when we can't prevent it, I do try and do everything that I can to help local, state, whoever law enforcement to close as many cases as possible, Mind you, they are phenomenal, but I do try and help any way that I can.
Well, that's awesome.
I try not to suck.
No, you did 100% grade A, like A+++ job of not sucking. So Kyle, can you top that? What Heather does?
No, I can't top that. I like to help Heather with whatever she's working on in whatever way that I can. A lot of the stuff that I do outside of the podcast has to do with military. I do a lot of training for military police in the Navy. And then I work all of the inaugurations or the Special Operations Command. I like to go down and help them with all of those things. And so really it's just the continuity of government. That's kind of where my wheelhouse is.
Let's talk about the Big Mad True Crime episode on Emma Compton. What was it about her case that made you want to share her story?
So I actually heard about this case from Haley. She does such an amazing job working with families, and she worked with Shauna, Emma's sister, with another podcast that I absolutely love. And she was like, hey, would you be interested in covering her case? And then because the case happened in Virginia and there was a lot of communication issues between Shauna and the Halifax County Sheriff's Department, I was able to kind of step in, talk to Shauna, and try and explain to her how the legal system works in Virginia, why they may be saying or doing certain things in a particular manner in Virginia, what it means for the case. Should she be worried about this? Should she be worried about that? And so then I became attached to the case and I wanted to cover it even more. And because it's domestic violence, I have my own history with that, obviously not with Kyle. But I have my own history. So when it comes to domestic violence cases, I'll never say no, because the overreaching lessons that need to be taught to literally anyone who will listen is endless. We have so many questions of, why didn't she just leave? Why doesn't the justice system take these things seriously? What is probable cause? How can the police step in? All of those things. I feel like the more people know, maybe we'll stop asking, why didn't she just leave? And instead shift the focus to, why didn't anyone stop him, or why didn't he stop himself?
You guys have shared a ton of stories over time, but what about this case in particular stood out to you? And let's start with Kyle first.
The biggest thing that stuck out to me about this case was the length of time it has taken to bring charges. And as the case unfolds in court and we see it play out, we'll know a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes. But the amount of time it's taken from just reading the evidence and the information that we do have, I would like to know why it's taken so long and what part really pushed the grand jury to bring the charges.
Heather, what about you? What was it that stood out about Emma's case that you're like, yeah, we got to do this?
I think when it comes to Emma, it's the fact that she could be any of us. And sometimes I think there's this narrative that only weak women fall prey to abusive men, and that's absolute bullshit. She was independent, she had her own business, and she worked to get to a point where she was able to own the business that she did own at the time of her murder. And I think that sending this message that you're not weak if you're being abused, and also you're not immune to abuse if you're a strong woman, needs to be shared far and wide.
I would say, honestly, sometimes the strongest of the women are the most likely victims. I mean, sometimes you got really independent, smart women, and they fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Or they put themselves in dangerous situations. Like, you may be book smart and you may be really smart in the realm within which you operate, but you take that person out and put them in a different environment that they're not used to, they've not functioned in before, and they become a prime target no matter how smart they are.
Well, I also think abusers are just really good at what they do. It's never this, I met them, they abused me thing. It's the tiny etching away at what the person once was. And by the time enough pieces have been taken away, you don't even know how to rebuild. This is just your normal now. So it's not like it happens overnight and these strong women all of a sudden lose everything that they thought they once were. It's like a million tiny cracks in a mirror, and eventually you can't even see yourself.
Yeah, because you look in the mirror and you don't recognize the person that you were 10 years ago. And they are smart about it. I mean, they get you in hook, line, and sinker. And then once that wedding ring goes on, or they know you're stuck, or they know that you're committed to it, they chip away piece by piece by piece. And there are times where I know some that think that no matter what they want to do, there's no escape. And I think that's the scariest position to be in at times is no matter how smart you are, how sophisticated you are, no matter how good you are in your career, in that home life, there are times where you don't think you have any other options. You don't think there's an out. You don't think that you have even the strength to get out, because the strength to leave someone like that sucks up every bit of energy you have. And then to do it safely is a whole different ballgame. I mean, it's just, to those that get out, it's amazing because it's quite the struggle. And then those are the victims that don't get out and end up dead. We got to do something to fix this, you know?
They put in effort to make sure that it's as difficult as possible to leave. They want to make sure you feel provided for. So you quit your job and you become a stay-at-home mom, and then you don't have the financial resources to get out. Or you have kids, and while this deadbeat piece of shit has no interest in being a single father, he will scare the absolute piss out of you by acting like he's going to take your kid if you leave. And he's going to paint you as a terrible mother or something like that. Or they isolate you and they don't let you see your friends. They guilt trip you into staying home when everyone's going out. And eventually you haven't seen your friends enough to even have the same relationship that everyone else has with them. And now all you have in this world is your abuser. And then your gauge of what is happiness and what is sadness is skewed, where you might see these tiny wins as massive wins. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I got a hug today. Like, what a good day. And then the old me still in the back of my head was like, holy shit, that's pathetic. But then you're like, well, this is all I get today. Don't shit on yourself, Heather. Enjoy the moment. And it's easy to look back on that and be objective. But in the moment, it's such a mind fuck.
Oh no. Like when you walk in, it's like, oh, I didn't get the silent treatment today. Score. Yay.
Yay. I'm so excited. What a gift. This is what I wanted to be when I grew up. Fuck.
No, it's like, oh God, there wasn't an argument today. There wasn't like the smell of ozone because you knew the mood was shifting.
And I think it's important to talk about with Emma's case. She was living on property that her dad had gifted her. She built a house with her husband and she didn't want to leave that. Her dad was so important to her. She grew up in this area. Like this was so meaningful to her. And as we learned in the episode, like Emma was so close to her family. So it's understandable that she would be like, I'm just going to move to the basement. Let's put some space between us. Like, hopefully this will help. And I'm sure she was also terrified of him.
I talk about it in the episode a little bit. Whenever I do a domestic violence case, I always stop everyone and discourage them from asking, well, why didn't she just leave?
Right.
And while it's easy to say at the end, like, gosh, if she had just left the house and the land and her store and all of these things, she would have her life. But everything that she'd be walking away from was also a massive percentage of her life. She was so close to her dad, and that earth was a part of her dad.
Mhm.
And that home that she built was a part of her dad and a part of her story. And I think so often we think about the fact that, oh, she could have just left and all of these things, but it's constantly on women to walk away from everything they've earned, everything they've built, everything that's a part of their story, to start at zero. And these men don't have to, all because they couldn't take no for an answer. And there's no easy way to fix this because, yeah, we want to go back in time and just airlift her out of that house and be like, it's going to be okay. We're going to start over. But the fact of the matter is, she shouldn't have to. She didn't do anything wrong. All she did was have the patience of a saint and the work ethic of nobody I know. I mean, she busted her ass and was there for so many people. And it sucks that women keep getting put into these positions where walk away from everything you've put your heart and soul into or die. There should be a middle ground where you can survive and not have to give up literally everything you've ever done. And I think most of us don't think that the people in our life are ever going to take ours. And so that's hard to get to the final part of, where you're like, yeah, it's bad, but I'm alive. Yeah, it's bad, but he's not going to kill me. Yeah, I could leave, but me staying isn't going to result in someone killing me. Most people aren't going to think that the people that they fell in love with are capable of ending their lives. And so I think it's easy for us to look back and want to change some things for her, but she was working with the information she got. And when it comes to domestic violence, you're in love with the person you think they are, and the person that you think they're capable of being, even though that's not who they are anymore. And that keeps you afloat for a while. While you are dealing with reality, it's the who he once was that you're holding on to. Like, oh, it can get better. He can do this. We can do that. It's not going to get as bad as now we know it got. But I just hate the idea that any woman has to choose either everything she's ever worked for or her life.
Kyle, you are law enforcement, a former member of law enforcement, I think, and you keep your fingers and toes in the law enforcement sector some, so you've got a pretty good pulse on the beat of it. What were your thoughts on how they handled the investigation into her disappearance and ultimately how the murder investigation was handled?
The first thing that I noticed just from the information that was presented was when they called to report her missing, that I didn't see any evidence that they went to the house immediately and just looked for stuff. All of the missing person reports that I've ever done and all of the investigations when it comes to missing people is that you start where they live, right? And you start where they were last seen. And that is especially true because a lot of people will be at their house, like in the basement, right? So like, I don't know where they're at. They aren't answering their phone. They're just ignoring you. They're at the house, right? Or they went somewhere. And I think it's really important that the sister, Winona, when she went there and she said, hey, all of her stuff is here. Credit cards, her car,
Yeah, she didn't leave.
all of this stuff. Well, that gives police a good understanding that that is the place. Like she made it home from work, right? The vehicle made it home from work. Her stuff made it home from work. And so from that house is where she was last seen. And so that's a good place to start, especially with the land there. I know that they did some type of searching of the property or the surrounding areas. And obviously the volunteer had a heart attack, which was something they had to deal with. But one of those would be the biggest thing that I would do. And also, we're talking about a very small town. So Halifax is not a big place. There's not a lot of people. The law enforcement in that area should have a good understanding of what businesses are in there and how well known Emma is, right? I'm sure they go to that store often, that they interact with her, they interact with the husband. They should have had a better understanding of that. As the case kind of unfolds and keeps going, the interviews with the sister should be more prevalent and the communication on trying to tie things to Emma and not just, oh, she might just be somewhere else. She could be in Mississippi with her sister. I mean, there could be a million different reasons of why they didn't do a thorough investigation. But elementary, we go and look at the house. We go and knock on doors and neighbors.
In trial, I follow the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. And in criminal investigations, and please, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but what's the most likely reason or what's the most likely scenario that occurred? You almost always immediately look at the loved one. You go to the house first and you look at the house. And if she made it home and all the obvious stuff is still there, like the credit card, it's almost like a duh.
Yeah. They never even notated if they made any phone calls. Did they check the hospitals? Did they call the jail? Did they, run her through NCIC to see if maybe she was arrested for something? I didn't see any evidence that they had even done the basic part of looking for her. Immediately, like Virginia State Police, and especially in Virginia, we send a missing persons. It's like a SP-183. It's the form that we fill out. We send over there with a photo, and it gets put out so that if someone encounters her, she comes through law enforcement or her ID is scanned somewhere, it'll pop up with her license plate. If that gets scanned, it pops up as a missing person. And I don't know that was ever done, at least not in a timely manner.
Did they ever bring dogs to the property at first? I don't know that I saw that. Because to me, you got a missing person, you got a car at the house, you got a credit card there. And to me, you bring out the cadaver dogs. To me, that's one of the first things you do.
Yeah, it appears that they did bring out dogs, at least a cadaver dog, during some portion of the investigation, which they did hit on one part of the search, but it wasn't associated or affiliated with the disappearance of Emma.
Yeah, because if a dog hits, they're smelling the scent of decomposition, but it could be contributed to many different things. No dog is going to be able to hit on the specific scent of one person's decomposition. So it can be an animal, it can be other forms of decomposition. So while there was a hit, whatever they wound up looking into, they couldn't find anything to tie it to Emma.
Mm. And then she was found, right across the property line, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there was an electric fence at the end of her property line. I think it was like 200 to 300 feet outside of the property line. So whomever, and I only have to say whomever because legal stuff, whomever did this to her likely didn't have any help, didn't want to ask for any help, and had limited strength and mobility. This person would have been limited in the time they had to dispose of her body, in the strength that they had to dispose of her body. She was found in a red sleeping bag. So whoever this was understood that moving a non-living person is difficult. When you are alive, you have a center of gravity. None of us are aware of it at the time because we're only experiencing one of these things actively. But when you lose your center of gravity, I don't know if you've ever caught somebody who fainted or something like that, it's a lot harder to hold them up because they're not helping you keep them poised. And so if you try to move a dead body, everything else is going to move at the same time. They're not helping you by like hooking their arm around you or holding on to you around your neck. It is very difficult. It is a lot of weight. Rarely are we ever lifting large things over 100 pounds.
Yeah, so when they show in the movies how easy it is to move a dead body from the trunk to something else, I'm like, yeah, that's not a dead body. I'm like, I mean, it's just not. It is. It's dead weight is literally dead weight, and it's not what we see on TV.
He would have likely just dragged that as far as he could. We know that she was found in a somewhat shallow grave. I think a lot of people who watch movies and TV assume that digging a hole is easy. Digging a hole is the fucking worst. Have you ever had a garden? My God. These people, they go out and they're like, oh, I'm a criminal genius. I'm just going to dig this grave. Like there's a reason that people use equipment at cemeteries. It's not simple to dig a grave. And so this motherfucker just got tired and was like, oh, never mind. Yeah. I figure nobody else is going to be out here. Again, this is a very remote area. It's not densely populated. So the chances, as we see in her case, of anyone just stumbling upon this is 0 to a hunter. The only person who is going to find her is likely a hunter or some kid who decided he was going to build a fort, which thank God it was the hunter. But either way, horrible. He was banking on the fact that, or she, because this is alleged, because it hasn't gone to trial yet, they were banking on the fact that nobody was going to be out here, so it wouldn't really matter. My laziness, my tiredness, my this is too hard, the soundtrack of that asshole's life came in full force when he was trying to dispose of Emma. And it's because of that, thank God, that she was found. I wish it was sooner, but it is due to the laziness and the dumbassery that, thank God, she was eventually found.
I like that word. I have to put that in my repertoire, dumbassery. But here's what I think is odd in particular, is they literally didn't search her house until after the body was discovered. Like, WTF?
Yeah, that hits a red flag for me, at least for laziness with the law enforcement, especially when this happened. In Virginia, you have the capability of doing historical cell phone pings. I mean, honestly, you could tell if she went from her place of business back to her house or if she went anywhere outside of that and in between. And then where was the last place it was? And especially with missing people back when this happened, like it was easy enough to make a phone call to dispatch and just have them say, hey, contact the provider and do real-time pings.
Get the cell phone tower pings. Right. Where was the last place she pinged?
When I'm not so concerned about her paying, We know his alibi seems icky and squishy and not solid. And so we don't hear a ton about verifying or disqualifying his alibi. We know that Shauna talked to people that were like, what are you talking about? He didn't work all weekend, which in theory would have put him on the property. Where were his cell phone pings during the time that he claimed to have been at work? Were his
Right.
cell phone pings where he would have worked? Or were his cell phone pings on that property? And then what is the probable cause? Like, do we have probable cause to go in the house? I think that's where I would have a question for law enforcement. And you might be able to answer this. What probable cause is needed when a person is missing, but there is a lack of evidence that there's any foul play involved? Obviously, police need to take into account what is normal for the person. So Shauna felt like police weren't taking her seriously when she was like, this is out of character. She would never do this. Something is wrong here because the room was clean and now it's messy. Police can only go based off of the information that they're given when dealing with a missing person. The context clues from the people who are close to the missing person are extremely valuable. What were her patterns? When did the patterns break? When did people stop hearing from her? And what probable cause is needed past simply asking for a consent search of the house? Because he could have said no and then they couldn't have looked, versus what law enforcement would have needed to get a judge to sign off on a warrant to allow them to search without his consent.
Well, and that's why it's so important for law enforcement to be trained on how to write an affidavit and how to tell a story, because you have to give the judge something to think, okay, that's enough for probable cause. But some of them need to be English majors. But they need a lesson in storytelling. Even when I've got cases that I have to go present to a judge so I can get a kick out order or I can get an emergency temporary restraining order, I do the same thing. I have to write a story for the court to read. So the court reads this story and goes, okay, this is what's going on. They have to be able to understand it. But I do think there may be a lack in training of teaching how law enforcement needs to tell the story. Because I'm not saying lie about anything. I'm saying, but there is a way to convey a message and convey that message appropriately. But you have to accurately and convincingly tell the story of the investigation to give rise to that probable cause. And I got to tell you, I think that is missing in a lot of reports.
Sometimes there's grace to be given, particularly in small departments.
Correct.
So when you have small departments and you're learning how to investigate from investigators who are old as Methuselah, and
man, I need to put out, where's the list? I can start writing down words I'm stealing from you. I love it.
So if they're only being taught what the last guy knew, you're going to get more and more limited. I've worked with large departments and small departments. I have so much love for small departments that wear no ego, where they're like, yeah, we just want to be more efficient. Like, what do you need? And so when I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated by this report. I need this information and reports from now on. And they're like, done, no problem. But then you deal with departments that have ego problems and they're like, who the fuck are you? Or you can't tell me anything. I'm the detective. It's like, cool. Well, your boss told me to help you. So let's work together because no one's here to make you suck. All of us have the same goal.
I hate the ego. Just check it at the door. You're a public servant. I'm trying to help you do your job better, which helps the public better. This is not about ego. And I think we all know this. Every day of my life, I learn something and I don't know it all. And I can sit on the bench with a black robe. I don't know it all. And I'm more than happy to have someone say, Judge, you're wrong. Here's the law. I'm more than happy to have a judge tell me, Miss Locke, you're wrong on the law and here's why. Okay. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. You just fix this. And if you fix it, you become that much more useful to the public you're being paid to serve.
Yeah. Thankfully, most of the departments that I work with are just the best. I've met so many incredible police officers, detectives, chiefs, deputy chiefs, sheriff's department, you name it. But the reach of people who get to small departments like Halifax can be pretty limited because their statistics are never going to be terrible. And funding for programs that give them outside assistance and training and anything are going to be limited as well because they're so rural that no matter what happens, their statistics will likely never be so bad that anybody thinks to qualify them for an additional grant for services.
I couldn't agree with you more. The small departments get screwed.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the statistics that are going to the feds. They have this many aggravated sexual assaults. They have this many murders. They have this many attempted murders. They have this many gang RICO cases and, engaging cases. They don't have any of those things. And so where are the resources going to go? It's like the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah. And then that doesn't make it any less devastating for the family who's just begging for answers. There's just a lack of training, which is totally separate from the fact that this family is in complete and utter devastation right now. And they have no idea why the department is not responding the way that they feel like they should. There is this just gray black hole area in between law enforcement and families sometimes where both might be doing their best, but it seems offensive to the other one, even though maybe it wasn't the intention, but it doesn't change the outcome.
It's hard for me to argue.
Yeah. They had an opportunity to assist or to get assistance from the state police.
All the time. Virginia State Police doesn't fuck around. Those guys are waiting for a moment to help.
We have the Rangers, we have DPS, we have the state troopers. They're looking to help out. They're like, sure, we'll help out.
I work with state police in Virginia all the time, and they're some of my favorite people. The people you can call and be like, hey, I need this to happen. And they're like, when and where?
It's like, give me the time, give me the place, see you there.
Phenomenal.
Let's talk about where things are today in Emma's case. Her husband was arrested and charged with her first-degree murder, but that's about all we know. We don't know what led them to those charges after so many years. Michele, do you have any insight as an attorney? Why it took so long? What evidence they might have? Is it a smoking gun type situation, or is it just building up all the circumstantial evidence over 7 years?
I don't think that law enforcement and prosecutors, because this case has been going on long enough that I would be willing to bet that the prosecutor's office was heavily involved in the investigation, would be my best guess. Because on that long of an investigation, they're not going to get that indictment unless they are pretty darn sure of what they have to, because they've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And so I just don't think after that many years that it's just circumstantial. They're going to have something else, is my guess. And it's totally a guess, but it's an educated guess. But I don't think this case is just circumstantial. I think they finally got something that can do more than just make it a coincidence that he was there and she disappeared and it looks like he did it, or whoever did it, whoever's accused of it. I would suspect there's something tangible.
Yeah. And I want to follow up with Heather and Kyle on the same question, but I have one more. And I actually want everyone to kind of talk about this. What do you think about the first degree charges? Because that means that it was planned, right?
Well, first degree is different in every state. So I don't know what the interpretation of first degree in this state is. I just don't know. I mean, I can tell you what it is in Texas, but typically first degree is you really didn't like the person, you really wanted them dead. Typically.
So Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure in Virginia, first degree is either evidence of premeditation or during the commission of a felony. If it was a homicide in the commission of like felony, domestic assault, malicious wounding, something like that, they could bring the first degree charge. But I think it also might be one, either they have a shit ton of evidence now all of a sudden, or two, they wanted to leave room for the jury to convict down to second degree or some kind of other charge.
Do you really think prosecutors go in overcharging, thinking, oh, we'll get the lesser included? Like, I don't know if they do that.
Yes, we see that in true crime.
Really?
All the time. Yeah. And so it leaves room because if the jury, and you have to keep in mind, this is going to be a jury of peers in a very small town. The resources of that town are not exponential. It is based off of previous instances of juries in this county. Do they feel like they are going to be able to understand the complexities of the case? What took so long? Will they overthink or underthink the evidence? And do you want to give them options where if they can't all agree on one thing, maybe they can agree on the other? And I think that might be where cause of death comes in here, because cause of death came in pretty late. He was charged with homicide. They announced this is a homicide investigation, but they didn't list the cause of death. And her family didn't even hear it from the police department. They found out on the news. And when they asked the police department, hey, why didn't you let us know ahead of time? That detective was like, I'm going to be real honest with you. I didn't even know it was getting released. So there's somebody else who maybe was like feeling the heat here and was like, oh, fuck it. Like, just, I'm going to tell my friend at the media because I'm close with this one reporter or something. Neither here nor there. But what I think is interesting is we were dealing with skeletal remains when Emma's body was found. And that to me sounds like a lack of small tissue. And we know that they stated her cause of death was like violence to the neck, something along those lines. And that's not the easiest thing to tell when someone is skeletal remains.
I was going to say, if they can show like that it was a throat injury, so strangulation, crushing of the windpipe, well, it's just still strangulation. But anyways, if they can tell that from the skeleton,
it would be very difficult. There is a bone in your neck that can be broken, but most of the time it's actually not when someone is strangled to death. And so that makes me wonder if after time, he finally told someone what he did, whether they had someone wear a wire, do a controlled call or something. If they have evidence that was finally presented where he may have, not realizing he was doing it, admitted to something. And that was the final nail in the judicial coffin. And I mean, at this point, I believe we know did he plead not guilty, Haley?
He hasn't pleaded anything yet.
He hasn't pled at all yet. Okay, but he is out on bond. I would be curious to know if it's possible that they have some kind of wire control call, something that alludes to some kind of cause of death, because it can be really difficult to determine a neck injury cause of death unless there are broken bones. And oftentimes, I don't know, quite frankly, if I've ever seen a case, and I've gone through over 300 at this point, of someone who was strangled and had a neck fracture. And it was skeletal remains.
Yes, I'm saying if they can prove something from the skeletal remains with regards to strangulation or something, that means it was pretty blunt force trauma of some sort if there's going to be any evidence on that bone structure left.
Based off of what we know, it sounds to me like there was evidence of predation because some of her remains were found in the sleeping bag while others were strewn kind of across the ground. So it sounds to me like animals had gotten to her remains, as horrible as that is. You then have to differentiate between predation and decomposition along with perimortem injuries like the breaking of a bone before somebody died. So I am curious as to whether or not they might have additional verbal information from someone in this case that made them confident enough to finally bring charges and make them confident enough to make them first degree.
I think that's probably what has taken so long. It could have been a change in the prosecution. All of our Commonwealth attorneys here are elected. So you could have had a new Commonwealth attorney come in and be like, all right, we're going to do this. Or it could have been the collection of evidence based on of DNA evidence from a sleeping bag, the testimony. There could have been a wiretap put into place. It could have been just the collection of things over 7 years and hopefully closer to the actual charge. He had to have either admitted to it or they had to have had some kind of evidence to prove that this was at least planned, if not planned in the moment, right? If there was an opportunity for him to stop in the moment and he didn't, and he continued, then we're talking about first degree. But also, if there's a confession of some kind, or if there was, like what Heather was saying, a a wiretap or he divulged information that is the murder. So I think that's probably what took so long.
Was he arrested for something before and ever in custody for a period of time for anything else?
No, but his son was in prison, and you have to wonder, were there any jail calls?
Well, I'm thinking jail calls, jail snitch, like someone put in the jail cell to get, that's just what went through my head is what do we have on jail calls or some snitch?
Shauna had said that she hopes that by sharing Emma's story, and obviously we're all here amplifying it, everything, Haley, you've done with Moms and Mysteries, Heather, what you're doing with Big Mad True Crime, Kyle and Michele, what we're doing here on this conversation. She hopes that this can save a life, or at least give someone a reason to not go back, to leave and never look back. That's a very powerful quote. What would you all say to someone who's trying to leave an abusive situation?
I think it's not simple. Allowing people the opportunity to hear the stories of people who didn't get out is what you can say. Because there were times, I remember I got choked and I texted a friend and my friend was like, well, then why are you still there? And I remember getting mad at my friend for the audacity to wonder why I was still in a situation that was dangerous for me. But I acknowledged in my own head at the time that while I knew it was bad, I wasn't ready to leave. And I can't make sense of it. Like it doesn't make sense to somebody who hasn't been through it. And maybe to people who have been through it, it doesn't make sense either. It's just not that simple. You have been mind fucked over and over and over again. You question your own sanity. You question your own reality, especially when someone else who you have chosen to trust is telling you that reality is different.
Well, and chosen to love. It's not even just trust. You chose to give this person your heart.
Yeah. And so I think I wish that I had had more access back then to hear about other people who had been through it, because you wonder if you're being dramatic or if you're the problem or if you deserve this. And all of these things go through your head because you're just trying to find a silver lining so that you can breathe. And you go through a million thought processes to figure out what the fuck you're supposed to do. And there's always that old you in the back of your head being like, girl, this is fucked up. You shouldn't be here. But then the new you is also like, but you're not ready to leave. I wish that I had heard other people's stories so that maybe the part of me that was making excuses for what I was going through or making excuses for what was happening to me would have shut up a little bit. And there's no easy thing you can say to someone that will make them ready to leave. I know now from podcasting and then also my job in intelligence is that strangulation is a lethality factor on every plane. So don't quote me on this, but I feel like I'm right. It's something like in a domestic violence situation, if your abuser strangles you at any point in time, I think it's you're 700 times more likely to be killed by that abuser.
Well, yeah, because choking you is attempted murder. I don't care what anyone says, or cutting off your airway. That is designed to kill.
Well, and plenty of things happened to me that were violent and uncalled for and inexcusable. And that didn't particularly, I guess it did, but it kind of blended in with all the other shit that he did. Knowing what I know now, I would have looked at it differently, but also on the other aspect. So I deal mostly with gun violence, but I have found that people who have been charged with strangulation are more likely to, and we're talking about, are also involved in gun-related criminal activity. They're more likely to not only shoot or be shot in the future, but the most likely to be the one who gets killed in the shooting. And so it's just really interesting to look at the statistics and what that might mean about the psychology behind a person willing to strangle another person. And if I had to give my own theory, obviously I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I wonder if it is the person's inability to not get up close and personal when dealing with their own emotions of rage and anger. So some people have the ability to not wrap their hands around someone or to at least put distance between themselves. So most people, when we're talking about gun violence, they pick up a gun and they shoot from a distance. But somebody who participates in gun violence but is also willing to strangle people, there is a disconnect there where they're not able to remove themselves from the immediate action of a violent event and then puts them more at risk for being killed. Whether it's domestic violence and strangulation upping the lethality risk in a relationship, or you're just talking about gun violence and people who have prior strangulation charges, once strangulation enters the chat, death really does become an option for everyone. And I mean, if anyone's listening to this and their abuser has ever put their hands on or around their neck or even threatened it, please play this back to you or something. Just that is the moment. I mean, there are so many moments that could be of no return, but let that be the one where it really puts things into perspective of how bad it is, statistically speaking, and not just personally.
That's 100%. 100%.
Yeah. So I did a whole episode about this, and it's 750% more likely.
So
you were
close.
So close. And I was reading this thing where it was basically domestic violence has no equation that you can plug these things into and see what's going to happen unless strangulation is involved. And then it's a roadmap to what's coming. I mean, just really, like Heather said, play that back. Your chances of homicide increase 750% for people who have been previously strangled compared to victims who have never been strangled. And that's from the Strangulation Training Institute. Even if it was 100 times more likely, that's terrifying. But 750%, that's unfathomable. So thank you for sharing that statistic, Heather. I think that is the one statistic besides, 1 in 4 women will experience partner violence and things. But the 750%, I researched that case 3 years ago and it has never left my mind because it is so terrifying. And then you have cases where people will call the police and say that they've been strangled, and then the police won't see any injuries. And so then they're like, no, you're making it up. But only 50% of people have visible injuries. And that's one thing that I'd like to see more training on strangulation in law enforcement. Kyle, I don't know how you feel about that, but it seems like if only 50% of people are showing injuries, you obviously have to listen to the victim and have them explain what's going on. You can't just look at them and be like, didn't happen, we're moving on. That's clearly not working.
When it's so difficult too, because I mean, even as a victim of domestic violence, even if you hear that statistic and you're like, oh shit, I have to go now, there's a solid chance that for the last few years, months, days, whatever, however long you've been with this person, you have actively participated in protecting your abuser's reputation. You told everyone they were great, even when they told you they were not great. You feel like you've isolated yourself and not just them. So you feel like, who do I go to now? Who's going to believe me? Or maybe they're a really charismatic psychopath and you feel like no one is going to believe you. For you to even have a home to run to that's safe. It can feel like even if you do get out, what do you do about it? And I think that's where the National Domestic Violence Hotline comes in, because they'll believe you. Even if you literally just call them to be like, I'm not ready to leave now, but I need to talk to somebody about what's going on in my life so that maybe the next time I call you, it's going to be for resources. Somebody just please listen to me. And they can kind of walk you through next steps. Or maybe you can pick one friend where you're like, hey, I need you to not judge me. I had a friend like that. I need you to not judge me. I'm going to tell you everything that's going on. I'm not going to leave right now. And I know that's ridiculous. I'm not ready, but I need you to be here for me when I am ready to leave. And that's exactly what she did. So even if that's only the domestic violence hotline, you can't tell your dad, you can't tell your mom or your siblings or your friends because you feel like you've talked him up just too much, or you're worried that if you tell them and you're not ready to leave yet, that they'll judge you. Call the domestic violence hotline so that they can be your person.
These are all incredible words of wisdom. And Honestly, I can't thank you, Heather, Kyle, Haley, and Michelle enough for basically amplifying these stories and doing Emma what she deserves in order to help other people and to help amplify this case. And we look forward to seeing a resolution from this. Hopefully soon. Hopefully soon at this point. That would be great for the family, especially Shauna. So now we're going to go into the next segment, which is the last segment, which is actually introducing all of us. This has been a long time coming. I got to say that. Heather, we've known each other for 5 years. Actually, well over 5 years.
500 years.
We've traveled a lot of miles together. We've gone the ins and outs of podcasting. It's not always been smooth, but it's been rewarding. Let's just put it that way. I think that spiritually and otherwise, I think it's been very compelling, but I also think that it's opened up a whole new portal to understand what it's like to engage with listeners and understand what it's like to do good work that helps amplify the causes that we feature on our show. Heather started her podcast in 2019. Which is incredible. Myself and my co-host, Jamie Beebe of Strictly Stalking, started January 21st, 2020. Heather, going back to that time and that era, what was it like for you when you first decided to jump off the diving board and get into podcasting? Was it what you expected?
I had no expectations because I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. Like, not even a single clue.
Has that changed?
I was raised, yeah, I think I'm pretty well versed now. Yeah, to clarify, because earlier you were like, it hasn't always been a smooth ride. Like between you and I, it's been smooth as hell. The business end of podcasting can be a shit show at times, but all is well now. I was raised by a homicide detective. And so my dad would just tell me about his calls for the day. And that was my bedtime story. And like, nobody just was like, hey, pass the salt. It was like, oh my gosh, my partner fell into the river today. You know, or like my arms went numb because I got cocaine spilled on them. So like very normal stuff. And I remember the Chris Watts case was all over the news. And so I always came at everything from an investigative standpoint. And I feel like we were missing so much information for a case that was so viral. So I got all of the discovery information I found in the butt crack of the internet. And I was like, cool, I'm going to read it because I love nothing more than reading everything I can ever find. I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, there is so much more to this case that, I mean, because I have a moral dilemma of true crime falling under entertainment. Like we can't change the category we fall under, but we can do something different with it. And so I always want to educate or advocate. And so if people were going to make this horrible thing a viral moment, I wanted them to do it with all of the information and learn something from it that they could maybe use later in another case or in a case near them where we know what evidence is, what probable cause is, what led to these different parts of the investigation to keep it going forward and bring resolution to it. So I was like, oh, you know, where the hell do I do that? And podcasting was apparently a thing. And I was like, let me order this 2-pack of mics off Amazon for $25. And I'll write all this. The notes I took first were on paper and pen, rookie mistake. So I had to reread it, 1,960 pages, and then put it into a computer so I could go chronologically. And then I was like, at least this information is here for anybody who wants it. And then it turns out they did want it. And they were like, you should do this case. And I was like, I definitely can. And then I kept doing it. And here we are.
You know, I got to say is that for anyone who hasn't listened to the multi-part Chris Watts case, that really broke new ground, I feel, in true crime podcasting. It was something that I had never heard such a deep dive into one subject, one story. You know, I grew up absorbing, obviously, Dateline 2020, many of the things that we all now know as sort of the mainstream of true crime entertainment, right? Or true crime coverage or whatever you want to say.
Skimming the top.
Exactly, 100%. But what you did there was a nuance to what you did, but also you were able to use your voice in a way that advocated for the victims that I had never actually heard before from that standpoint. So I was so moved by that. And I remember at the time, I think we had connected very early on because, again, we didn't start till January 2020, but we sort of found this like-minded path and pattern. I think we may have done a couple promo swaps and things like that. So we kind of, bonded on the advocacy level and just you being a really awesome, cool person. And then along comes Kyle. Kyle, who has been literally your creative and technology right-hand significant other for so long. For a lot of people don't know that he was the the DNA and the origin of polishing. Not that you need polishing, Heather, in terms of your voice or any editing.
No, I do. We love a supportive king. When I was like, I'm going to do a podcast, he was like, cool, I'll go on YouTube and learn how to edit them. Like, that's nuts. Like, the funniest review I ever got was from like beginning episodes where they're like, this woman sounds like she's annoyed just to be telling us this story. And so I went back and I listened. I was like, no lie found. Because you find your voice as you go along. But Kyle has this way of making your raw audio sound like something you would want to listen to. And if you listen from the beginning to where he is now, it's night and day. And my snack of a husband has talent.
Kyle, speaking to that, the first conversation I ever had with you, you basically wanted to analyze every part of podcasting. You literally had this fascination, this sort of unquenchable thirst for understanding the editing, the technology, the sort of algorithms behind it, and what you both have built through the Big Mad Media family, let's be fair, and what you've built there. And I think it was only a matter of time, Kyle, before you were going to step into the limelight and sort of become this dual threat in the household. So why don't you tell us about how you started your own podcast?
Just over editing for the past 5 or 6 years, every podcast I listened to, I tried to get like the way that they did it. So I would listen to how they edited or what it sounded like. And we all have our preference on what we like to listen to. I gravitated more towards like the cinema is in your ears. Like I'm watching a movie, but I'm listening to it. And I wanted that to be kind of a part of something that I would create one day. And really it was just an idea of interviewing people and then being able to put like the theatrical music in there and compelling stories and things like that. And Jake, you were one of the first people I reached out to interview for that. And I was like, this is what the idea is. We had so many conversations about doing podcasts about ghosts and cocaine bear.
What's up on a haunting?
I still want to do ghosts. I still want to do a ghost story.
We do. Yeah. That would be fun.
Anybody who's willing to take the bait, me and Jake are willing to interview anyone that has a ghost story. If you've been haunted, please reach out. bigmadtruecrime@gmail.com. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
That's not a plug, but it is because we're always looking to develop and to...
It's a potential plug.
Yeah, you can't make any potential plugs until we get the other one done first.
We had all met physically for the first and only time, technically, at CrimeCon 2022. Fun, festive, a lot of drama behind the scenes. However, I had laryngitis, so I basically had almost no speaking skills.
The only time Jake has ever been silent.
And it wasn't a protest. It wasn't some sort of protest or some sort of half-assery or being at a concert the night before. It was really just pure laryngitis. And it was so amazing to meet Heather and Kyle in person, both of you. And also you took me out to a lovely dinner and we talked about collaboration and just life and everything in general. Leah D was there.
I'm pretty sure I had a panic attack and you guys had to and I was, because I was at dinner and so the only time Jake has been silent, not a diss. Like that, Jake can have conversation with anyone on this planet and make them feel individual and special. I have a social battery where I shut down at a certain point and your girl has the anxiety. So CrimeCon, I love it so much. But there hits a point where my body hates itself. And so I felt it coming on. And thankfully I was around a group of safe people to be around where I can have a panic attack and no one's going to look at me funny, judge me. I'm breathing into a napkin. Just it'll pass. I'm fine. And it was honestly the most comfortable place to have a fucking panic attack because it's people who are just chill and get it.
Well, do you remember that dinner? We were sitting outside. It was lovely, right? We were sitting outside, daylight, basically watching the tourists go back and forth. And it was so fun. I think we had pasta, right? It was really, really good Italian restaurant. But the reason is that, Heather, you're really good at projection. And I got to say is that when I saw you sort of, for lack of a better term, this is not meant to sound ingenuous, but working the room at CrimeCon, You brought a lot of happiness and joy to people, and you brought a lot of connectivity. And I always say this is like, you have this royalty about you. And I'm not even joking about this. And Leah D and I once had a 5.5 hour conversation. We were supposed to record a promo, and we literally spent 5.5 hours talking. And in the last 10 minutes, we did the promo. And we had done a whole deep dive into you, Heather, into you, Kyle, and everything else like that. And just from a team standpoint, what you both mean to each other and what you both brought to each other. But it's very rare that people can work together and not be competitive, but be supportive in a way to both balance and elevate each other. That is a very rare thing, because it's not like you're both not now in the same sector. Let's be fair in this context. You know what I'm saying? But I also think this too. I think the rewarding nature of what the audience initially looked for in you, Heather, they're also looking for in Kyle as well. I think in terms of to be an advocate, to be somebody out there who's a professional in the field, and also bring that back to podcasting and really want to speak to survivors, speak to victims' families, and amplify these stories. So I think it's all kind of the same sector. And even playing back to Haley, you've been in this field for 9 years now. I mean, you were the part of the school they tore down to build the old school. You know what I'm saying? Like, you are that OG.
OG.
That's a joke from the Larry Sanders Show, by the way. I don't want to take credit for that, but it's...
God, I hadn't thought about the Larry Sanders Show in forever.
No one got it.
No, it's almost borderline like a dad joke, but I wanted to preface it that it wasn't a dad joke, but it was actually written probably by Judd Apatow or somebody at that time, Bob Odenkirk, who knows. But the reason being...
Oh gosh, it's getting worse.
I'm just digging. Haley, why don't you share the connective DNA between all of us? Because obviously you're eventually going to get to Michele and myself. But let's talk about meeting Heather and Kyle and what you brought to the table, and also your career as an advocate, podcast producer, writer, researcher, and the queen of all things, as Heather coined you.
Yeah, I met Heather and Kyle at the Vegas Crime Con. Heather actually had a table right next to the table that I was sitting at. And I just remember Heather had the cutest stickers. And I was like, oh my God, these are so cool. And then afterwards, she asked me to talk to her because she wanted to hire someone to help. Yeah, so we've been working together for almost 3 years now, and it's been great. I love working for Heather. I get to write in a way that I don't get to write for other people. And Heather still adds in her own stuff. Like, she doesn't just read my script verbatim, but
It has happened.
I know. But most of the time you're adding in your own little quips and stuff. But I do sometimes get to write them in. And my favorite one is Straight to Jail. I love that one. Anytime anyone does something she doesn't like. But yeah, I get to write in a way that I don't get to write for other people, which is really nice. And I was telling Jake this yesterday when we had a call. I was like, I love that Heather doesn't have any type of intro. Your intro is literally small talk sucks. Let's dive in. And I love it because I am such a straightforward, factual person that is really difficult for me to write a compelling intro or something like that. And so I love it. Heather gets straight to talking about who the people are in the story are, very victim focused, and again, educating people. And anytime, like she was saying earlier, domestic violence comes up, she pauses and shares her own experiences and reminds people that they're not alone. So it's great. And I think we work really well together. I've been with Heather for quite a long time. And then my 9-year anniversary is next month.
Nice.
Congratulations.
So I cannot believe it. It's nice. But yeah, so now I'm more focused on working with families, which Heather lets me do, which is really nice. You always, at least in my experience, I always feel a million times better putting an episode out there when I've worked with the family and they've looked over the materials and made sure that it looked good. And Shauna really loved Emma's episode, and Shauna loves Heather so much.
I love Shauna.
Especially because, and this is what I think really got Shauna, Heather was like, I'm going to get you a therapy dog to be there at the courthouse. And Shauna was like, I need that therapy dog. Oh my God, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be such a great thing for me to have. And so that just has really stuck for her. And yeah, it's been really nice. And that's my passion now, is working with families. And I also like connecting people with other people, right? So Heather knows more about the Virginia court system than I ever could. So being able to put Shauna in touch with Heather was really great. And now we have this episode. And now thousands of people through Big Mad True Crime and now Loveless Fridays are going to learn about Emma and how special she was. And Shauna does such a good job talking about Emma that you can't help but just love her when you hear about her. And so I'm really glad that people get to know about who she was and how much she's missed. And I'm just glad that Heather gives me that opportunity to get to talk about those things. Because not every podcaster wants you to get into those things. Some podcasts are just like straight facts. And not that these stories aren't facts, but just like facts about the murder or the missing person case and less about who the victim was or what the family's experiences have been. And that's always hard for me because that's really important. But Heather's always down for anything. She'll cover any case and she does such a good job. So yeah, I'm very thankful that I get to work with Heather, and Kyle's super fun. We have had some fun airport experiences together.
Heather, you and Kyle advocate for victims in this way. And you both bring about a different perspective. Like Heather, you present the story with a ton of research, family involvement as applicable in that way. And then Kyle, you bring on survivors in the moment and people who have gone through these experiences or people who have dealt with other people who have been there as advocates. Can you talk a little bit about your show and how you decided to basically find people and what the criteria is for the kind of people that you feature on Critical Incidents?
So it's interview-based podcast, and I interview anybody who's gone through a critical incident, and that's a spectrum of how people have had situations in their life that is critical to them. And so what we may think is critical to us or not could be critical to other people. And so, for example, Jake, you were on there, right?
Yeah, I appreciate the feature.
And it's good to hear those stories because, when you were describing going to coffee shops and having people who are going through mental health crisis essentially try to assault or abduct women, right?
Yeah.
As they're going through this mental health crisis, it's good to hear, right, as the listener and to hear these situations. And if they ever find themselves in that situation, they'll have an idea of at least where to start. Like, oh, okay, so if I diffuse the situation, let's try that, right? So let's try verbal judo. And then it gets all the way up to the point where I just interviewed Julia Cowley, right? So the FBI criminal profiler for the Golden State Killer. That's a lot of victims in that case and the things that she had to evaluate. And so it's interesting when you listen to it because you don't get to hear every day on how procedures are done, what the things that she has to look at, the criteria on how you're actually deciding which interview techniques based on their personality they need to do. It's a big spectrum of what can people hear that really resonates with them or that they're interested in knowing. And so I think it's a good thing to advocate for people who've gone through situations. It's also really cool to hear how people handled the situation. Because if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, you'll have an idea of where to start.
You bring so much to the table. And I think that from your perspective is bringing just lay people, like myself. I'm a victims advocate and do podcasting and things like that. And I've dealt with so many different survivors through the show that I co-host, Strictly Stalking with Jamie Beebe, and also now through Loveless Fear. And we've interviewed so many different people and understanding that the power of a survivor story or the power of a victim's family story that we all basically are in sync on. And that brings me to meeting Michele. Michele was actually a guest on Strictly Stalking, and we connected, we bonded on that level. And, she brings just a gravity. She's covered over 5,000 cases within the court. She's been in the courts for over 23 years as a former domestic violence court judge, family law attorney, and bringing that to the table. And when we connected, it was something that there was a credibility and professional nature of Michele, but also, as you're going to learn if you listen to any other Loveless Fridays episodes, there's a whole other side to Michele. She brings a candid, behind the chambers sort of situation where you get to know a little bit more about a former judge and a family law attorney that you'd never expect whatsoever. So this leads me to giving Michele the mic, which she's now no stranger to.
I don't know what to say on the mic other than, Kyle, your background, what you do is amazing. I love it. When I meet people like y'all, with what Heather has said and her insight and what she does day in and day out, and Kyle, what you do and your insight day in and day out, I kind of look at my stuff and go, yeah, that's really not much fun to talk about. And Jake always shakes his head at me, but I've been very fortunate to serve in some pretty cool roles and see lots of things from a very young age and a young professional. I was able to actually serve on a criminal jury. It was in a felony court, and the judge, who is now a federal judge now, was a district court judge at the time. It was like, how did you get picked? Because I went to law school with the prosecutor and the defense attorney I knew. And so I've had some really cool experiences. And the problem is, after 23 years, you don't remember them all. So what happens is Jake and I will be mid-story on something. I'm like, oh, that reminds me. And then it's some horrific case that I have to tell. I look at our system, and it goes back to what I said earlier. I do believe our system of justice is one of the best, and I think does the best it can given the circumstances of each and every case. I usually think that justice usually prevails. The question is whether justice is enough to satisfy the victims for what they went through, right? Because sometimes those two don't equate. You can't bring back someone from the dead. You can't bring back someone who was burned over, 90% of their body. You can't change those things. But man, if we can use platforms like this and combine all of our individual knowledge into something that people will listen to, people will learn from, because I truly believe knowledge is power, that maybe we save just one person today. And quite frankly, saving just one is worth however much time we've spent today doing this.
That's extremely strong perspective. And to that point, obviously, you're going to be listening to this episode on our Loveless Fear feed, which is a podcast that I host that deals with domestic violence, bad dating stories, relationship situations, sort of the dark tales told from the survivors' own mouths. So I share those stories. And then our talk show version is Loveless Fridays, which is here, the collaboration between Big Man True Crime, Critical Incidents, and Loveless Fridays. And then Michele and I, primarily Michele, because she'll be the main host, will be doing a podcast called Lovelust Law, which will dive into some of the sort of things you may know and some things you don't know about certain cases and behind the scenes of dating relationships and how the law sort of impacts that, especially from Michele's expertise. So that's going to be something that's going to be coming out this summer at this point. So we're excited to dive into that.
And I don't say it's so much expertise. It's really just the school of hard knocks, because you learn a lot from being in the trenches and doing the work and seeing how things work or not, and how to explain it to people, because lawyers do a really good job of making us sound really smart and using lots of 3-letter acronyms or using big words. And I don't think that helps the public. I don't think that helps people want to go into court to go seek a protective order, to go seek help, because it's too intimidating. And it shouldn't be that. And I think, so one of the things that you and I, Jake, always talk about is like, I just want to simplify the court system. It's not this big, scary place. It's a place where you can go get help, and it is there for you. Now, does it help everyone to the same level each and every time? No, but it's not something to be avoided. It's not as scary as you think it is.
Well, this is basically your role to do that, because I think a lot of people think, to be fair, the opposite. I think that very rarely do people have access to someone like you. They're not paying hundreds of dollars for an hour or facing you in court. And I certainly would not want to face you in court. I'll be honest with you right now. So hopefully that never comes to pass. We're all content creators, right? We all bring a lot of things to the table. And obviously there's challenges that come with that. Doing what we do. Like, I think that there are people that talk about us in third person, maybe share things on message boards, comments. So, a lot of them positive. We have very good, rabid fan bases in the way, but there's also situations that we come into with conflict, especially when you're speaking your mind and you're getting out there. And when you're speaking for a victim or working with a survivor, it's not always an easy path, because there are people that try to question that. They try to judge that. They try to basically re-victimize the people that we're covering the stories on. So for anyone who wants to answer this, what are some of the challenges that you faced, and ultimately what are some of the resolutions you've come up with as a content creator, and how to navigate that balance between getting the stories out there, but also dealing with people who may bring conflict to you?
I'm not going to say like I didn't struggle in the beginning with criticism and, wanting to care about what everyone said. and then maybe losing myself to the job a little bit. And Haley really helped me recover from that. But I think the best advice I could give literally anyone is please don't ever waste your time assuming I give a fuck. I will never think about you ever again. And that's not fair to you. You're upset about me. We don't know each other. I brought to you someone's worst fucking day. If you want to tell me that their death wasn't entertaining enough for you, I assure you, I give less fucks about you now that I do know who you are than when I didn't. And the best case scenario is that you keep the quiet parts inside. My only goal is to educate and advocate. And all I can do is create a podcast that I feel like is accomplishing those things at the standard I feel is necessary. And so if you're pissed off because I got a thing on like a Spotify comment that was like, the way you described his injuries did not make for like cinematic excellence. Rob, I don't fucking care. I truly don't give a single fuck. Say that to someone's face. I fucking dare you. You would never go up to a victim's family member and say some of the dumb shit y'all will spout out in comments, which, let's be fair, most people are amazing. Most people who listen to true crime have the hearts of giant angels.
Agreed.
But every now and then, there's a twat in the mix, and they feel like everyone gives a shit about the vitriol and diarrhea that goes on in between their ears. And let me be the one to erase the mystery of whether or not anyone fucking cares. Because I'm not the one. Maybe someone else will give a shit and you should waste their time, possibly. Don't waste it on mine. I don't give a fuck. Shut up. So, end of my TED Talk. Thank you for coming.
That was amazing. And I agree with your sentiment so much. I think there's very few constructive criticism moments out there that we can really, as Obama would say, like teachable moments in that way. But I would also say this, by some of the coverage that I do in the other podcasts that I do, Strictly Stalking, we've had, as you can imagine, you do a show about stalking, you're going to have the stalkers reach out to you, right? And that has happened on occasion. We've had some encounters and things like that. And we have advocates for the stalkers to try to convince us that the person who we featured is the stalker. And
feels like something a stalker would say.
100%. But a lot of times these people don't come out of the shadows. And you'll find this is that notice that most of the time when people do these comments, they leave them, let's say even on Instagram, and they're either their accounts are private or they have no followers and they're following like
no followers is always the one I see. No followers and no posts. I'm like, oh yeah, you're a big tough guy.
Well, we're the brave ones that are out there putting our faces and our voices and our opinions out there, right? And so you'll find a lot of people. There's very few people that would really sit here and be able to debate on any level of any sort of astute nature when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to victimization, and when it comes to true crime based on this panel here. You know what I'm saying? I would welcome anybody who has any critical thing to say.
Oh, I would love it. No one will, but I would love it.
No. Well, and that's the thing. You know, this is the whole thing in the bullying culture that we sort of all face. It's not easy to advocate for victims. It's not easy to advocate for survivors, but I flip it and say, look at the stories that we're covering. Look at what they've gone through. So any moments when I feel like, oh, this is just getting overwhelming or the negativity or this or that, I realize, my God, I mean, the people that we've featured, how much they've gone through, and I have no room to complain whatsoever. I'm very proud and privileged to be in the position I am.
I remember one time my dog died and I was devastated. Like the worst. I mean, gosh, that was the goodest boy. A family member of a victim whose case I covered reached out to me and was just so sweet and so kind to me and was like, oh my gosh, like I heard about Brody. I'm so sorry. Like, let me know if you need anything. This woman had lost her child and made time in her day to check on me because I lost my dog. And there are so many humbling moments when you work in crime, true crime, justice, any of it, where the amount of strength a person can have and the amount of grace and the amount of heart people can have is unmeasured. you don't truly understand strength and tenacity and the size of a soul, I think, until you've had to speak to people who have gone through pain that can't be measured.
So well said on so many levels. And I know that even being out there, I mean, all of us have faced a certain amount of animosity because for some reason people have their opinions on things, and they most of the time they don't necessarily do the due diligence to really research, because obviously we do a ton of work, we do a ton of sort of fact checking and things like that, and our opinions aren't always going to be valued. They just aren't. People are going to enter our lives based on the content that we distribute in between whatever they're going through, right? And they need to be able to take it out on something. And conveniently, we're getting the downloads. So that's, I can't complain about that. But I can also say that I can take a lot more personally, but when it comes to critiquing the survivors or the victims, that's where I really draw the line. That's where I really get defensive and angry when it comes to that. You have these brave people coming forward and stepping forward, and then you have people who had the audacity to judge them in that capacity publicly. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can send a private message. You can do, hey, well, I didn't quite understand why you made this decision, but I support your ability to come forward and share so I can be enlightened by it. But most people just want to, not most, but quite a few want to send off something that's negative. And I try not to feature any of the negative comments, because a lot of times, even when people are, not every negative comment is from a bully, but when you find the bullies, they just love that attention. They love the validation when you do that. And so we try to stay away from that.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like you got to bring back shame. I think every now and then shame is appropriate, because I feel like sometimes ignoring bad behavior is how we inflate it. So every now and then, when there's an egregiously dumbass comment, I'll be like, hey, let's feature this for a second and talk about all the reasons this is embarrassing, but only for one person in the room. Let's not be like this person. Like, one of them, they named themselves Die, D-I-E, and they were just a complete dick and a half. And they were like, people's murders are, I think it was this one, was like, are boring me. And there are too many ads and blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, sweet baby Jesus. Let's talk about how there are therapists for this exact condition.
You know what's funny about that is that people that complain about the ads are the same ones that don't want to pay the premium to get no ads. And I think that
I was like, it's free, my guy. Hit skip. But like, I don't go into your business and be like, hey, you shouldn't get paid for this.
No. And it's free consumable content. I think the same way. Do you complain to Hulu when you get the ads? Do you get the, it doesn't happen the same way. And
I'm writing a review,
exactly,
and it's going to change everything. It's going to work for free now.
And again, Michele, when we get reviews and we start to get that, we'll navigate through that, I think, in that capacity.
Just don't read them.
Listen,
don't read them.
Well, one, I don't for
Ever.
a couple of reasons. I get reviews all the time for what I do for a living. I have a group of people that very strongly dislike me. And they're usually the opposing side, because I've usually cross-examined them and they don't like that. Or they can't beat me in court. Anyways, I don't care. Like, I think I had some guy leave a message on my Instagram recently. It was like, all you're contradicting yourself is hilarious. I mean, it was meant to be a dig. And I don't remember the exact wording, but something along that. And I was like, well, I'm glad I provided you entertainment.
Oh, so I'd have been like, oh my gosh, I did. Can you be very specific and tell me exactly what I contradicted so that we can talk further about it? I graciously await your reply.
I don't got that kind of time.
Well, I mean, that's, it's fascinating what you brought up. We were talking about people come forward to debate. That would be an interesting show to be able to call out someone and say, hey, I saw this comment. Would you like to come on, and would you really like to defend your position? Because I would not want to sit facing Heather or Michele in that way. And Haley, you just need to.
I wouldn't want to face Heather. I'm like, damn. I'm like, Kyle, don't piss her off.
I've overthought everything I've ever thought. And so I've thought about everything that could be wrong and tried to prove myself wrong. And I also like to learn. So if you're going to teach me something, we're going to be friends. If you're going to be a dick, I haven't invented time travel, but my guess is you're going to start researching it.
What is next for each of you? What are you excited about? What's sort of the next era in what you want to accomplish in podcasting, in life?
I think for me, it's finding the balance between both jobs. And Haley is just an angel on this earth. I mean, I trust like 10 whole people, and Haley is in the top 5. And you could never replace that woman. She brings me like self in my life because before I felt like I was drowning. And she's also just a good human. But I think like just having a balance, and also I want Kyle to have his moment. Like his podcast is so cool. I want it to get the traction that it so badly deserves. I feel like his podcast is honest, like might be cooler than mine. And I'm intrigued by his podcast. Every time he's like, oh, I'm interviewing this person, I'm like, shut the fuck up. And I'm like, okay, well, she's my best friend now. I'm going to call her. And so, yeah, I want to see like where Kyle's podcast goes because it's really cool.
Yeah, I really enjoy where the podcast is heading. If I enjoy it, if I can bring joy to other people when they listen to it, I want to see it grow into a full-fledged interviewing podcast in person with video one day. That's kind of the goal for that one. But really, my goal right now and moving forward and how it's always been is to be present with Heather and our kids and to really absorb what life has to offer. Whether it's podcasting, I think that we will do great things in building our media company and hopefully bring in more podcasts, more creative ideas. But really, there has to be a different perspective that I hope that I can bring to the world when it comes to like relationships. Like me and Heather, our relationship with each other has had its ups and downs, but it is so important to me that Grayson, my son, if he sees how someone is supposed to treat their wife and how a wife is supposed to treat their husband and what that looks like, that means more to me than any business that we could ever have. The masculinity, right, in our life is always to be a provider. And if being a provider means supporting your wife and that's what's best for your family, that's what you need to do. And so those are the things that I plan on doing going forward is just really fostering our life and what we can get out of it.
Well said.
We've had so many conversations about like shitty men recently and toxic masculinity. And
So
he's
wait.
just like, yeah, he's like, not in this house. Absolutely not. We're going to be a supportive king over here. What does it look like? And just raising good kids, you know, what it looks like to support and love the people in your life and not it being this bullshit thing where it's like, you have to be in control. You have to be the head of the household. You have to be the monetary leader. Like, fuck off. You have to be happy. You have to have a balance. The people have to lead into the thing that works best for their family. We have these big jobs, but then we have to make sure that we're something outside of it and not just these people who work. And then what our life looks like outside of it. Are we leaning into the area of our unit that brings out the best of us? And what does that look like? And making sure that our kids grow up. And sometimes it's harder than others to just really instill that like everybody has equal worth and everybody's deserving of respect, regardless of literally any other factor. And also expecting the same from other people and not taking it when people treat you like you're less than or something like that because you're a girl, and making sure that our son never treats anybody less than because they're a girl and things like that. We went into like relationships and like women empowerment and toxic masculinity real fast, but here we are.
We talk about balance a lot, actually, off kilter from the Lovelust team here. And Michele, you have struggled consistently with that balance. You've raised 5 children at this point.
Yep.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that? And then I'm going to get to you, Haley Gray, after I know everybody's got their conflict with this stuff.
As it relates to doing this new venture that I'm doing, right? Because my life has been in the courtroom advocating, and I have a hard time using the word advocate just because of my additional role on the side that I don't take positions on things for the most part, but helping and assisting my clients, listening to all the facts. And God, balancing is a challenge. In the last 12 months, I did the math this week, as a matter of fact. In the last 12 months, I got divorced. I had both my knees replaced. I had another cervical fusion. I had my broken nose fixed. That was in 12 months. And I'm still standing here. and not looking half bad for the age I just turned and considering all the things I've gone through. And so I will tell you, this part of my life has become the part that I'm finding such a ton of enjoyment and fulfillment out of. I help my clients each and every day in court, but in this forum, my knowledge can be spread to such a wider audience. And while I'm not the end all be all for everything or everyone, I don't have the answer for everything. I've learned a lot by putting my own head on the chopping block. I've learned a lot by just diving head in first and not just dipping my toe in. And if I can help inspire and keep doing this to tell people that to keep going, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that you will wake up another day, and just to keep moving forward. Like, you will find happiness, you will find joy. And sometimes we find joy and laughter in dark places, and that's okay. If I can help people learn to have grace for themselves and not be so hard, and part of that comes from I've had to learn to give myself grace. I just think this is such a neat way in which to share and spread information to people that I don't think would have access to it otherwise.
Very well said. Haley Gray, you balance so many different shows, so many different projects, so many different advocacy things, and also try to carve out some semblance of a personal life. Very proud of you. You're taking a vacation next week.
Woo-hoo!
I'm sure everybody here is familiar with that, hopefully. It'll be nice, festive, and enjoyable, and you will not respond to any of our texts. However, tell me about what is next for you. What are you excited about? What is the next era for Haley Gray?
I'm excited to continue growing as a victim advocate. I'm just released a whole program for families learning how to advocate for themselves and their loved one. That was really great and a huge undertaking, but continuing to grow that, doing more speeches, speaking engagements, things like that, just educating people however I can. And then I'm trying to learn a better work-life balance. That's very hard for me. I pretty much work constantly, but I'm trying to learn how to be better about that, like not spend the weekends like in meetings and stuff, that can be for during the week and stuff. So I am currently working on that, but that's going to take some time for me because I'm a workaholic. So I have to learn to do that.
Here's what I'm going to tell you, Haley, because this has been one of my problems, and it's still something that I'm dealing with now, is at the end of your life, look back and are you going to say, I needed to work one more day? Or are you going to look back and say, I wish I had one more day with Ben? And it's kind of like, I think Jake and I talked about this the other day. It's at the end of your life, you're going to look back and think, man, I should have had one more hangover. No, you're not.
You know what? I will say I should have had one more iced tea. If I just could have allowed one more, just even a 12-ounce cup. Thank you for joining Heather, Kyle, Michele, Haley, and I on Loveless Fridays. If you have a dating or relationship story to share or want to participate in a discussion here on Loveless Fridays, DM me on Instagram at lovelustfridays or email me at lovelustfridays@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, sharing, and supporting. Links to guest social media and some content mentioned are in our show notes. If you know someone who's being abused by a partner, there is help available. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The National Domestic Violence Hotline provides essential tools and support to help survivors of domestic violence so they can live their lives free of abuse. Call 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233 or text START to 88788.